Hi, everyone. Welcome back to the Israel Connection. I'm Esti, and my guest today is Howard Libit. Howard, thank you for joining me today.
Thanks for having me.
Howard is the executive director of the Baltimore Jewish Council. So, Howard, you've been at Bethel before.
Of course, we've had many programs here. Been here for
Yes.
to join friends for simchas, that kind of thing, as well as for sad occasions.
Yes, and we especially had you a few times since October 7th to talk about anti-Semitism and everything that's going on.
College campuses, things like that. Sure,
Yes.
absolutely.
So, for those who don't know, what does the Baltimore Jewish Council do? What's their role in our community?
So the Baltimore Jewish Council is, we're an agency of the Associated, which is the Jewish Federation here in town, and we are most commonly thought of as the advocacy arm of the system and the Jewish community. So we do lobbying at the local, at the state, and the federal level on issues of funding and priorities specific to the Jewish community and our broader social justice concerns. And we do more than that, even though that's where we get most of the headlines and we speak out on Jewish issues. We also do work on Israel and advocacy and education. We do work on Holocaust commemoration and remembrance. We, of course, do work on anti-Semitism, educating, speaking out about that. We do the Elijah Cummings Youth Program in Israel is part of the Baltimore Jewish Council. We also work to build interfaith and intra-faith relationships, so building deeper ties with other faith and racial communities in town, and deeper ties across our Jewish communities. And then finally, the community's director of security is part of our team as well.
Okay. And has the role shifted a little bit since October 7th?
So since October 7th, yes.
Yeah.
I mean, I'll say two things. Number one is certainly in the last 6 or 7 years, I find myself spending increasing amounts of time focused on anti-Semitism issues, whether it's the college campuses or the schools or the broader community. And then since October 7th, both the nature of Israel advocacy and education that we've been called upon to do and that we felt compelled to do has changed, and also the level of work that having to fight anti-Semitism has also picked up.
So speaking of anti-Semitism, obviously in the past few years, not just since October 7th, we've seen a big spike in anti-Semitism, but in particularly since October 7th, 2023. Where do you see it mostly? Like going, speaking to people in colleges and other places, where do you see it mostly?
Everywhere is the answer.
Everywhere?
No, I mean, so look, the college campuses are intense issues of kind of, over the years, whether it was the Vietnam War or the Iraq War or things like when there's a big issue, it's intense there because the kids on the campus are all living in a tight area.
Right.
Outside people see they can get headlines, so that builds it up. So certainly what we're seeing on the campuses is intensified, maybe even on steroids. But you also see it in the public schools, and particularly in communities. In some cases where there's large numbers of Jewish students, and also where there's large numbers of Muslim students. In some of those schools, you see expressions on both sides. And then in the broader community too. I mean, I think we've seen it, unfortunately, in the graffiti. We see it in the Israel signs being destroyed.
Yeah.
We see it in the some of the protests that are broader community. So it's been hard all around.
And did you get to talk to some college students about this? And I'm sure you've met.
Yeah, I've spent a lot of time. I have a WhatsApp group that I'm part of with all 5 of our Maryland the Hillel directors across the 5 Maryland campuses that have Hillels. So we're in touch all the time. I'll go in and talk to the students, talk to the Hillel directors. I've done, I did anti-Semitism training for the leadership cabinet at Goucher College to talk to those the top administrators about the issues, and have had great meetings with Hopkins leadership and UMBC leadership and Towson's leadership and the students there too, and trying to relieve concerns when there's been an incident, but also trying to talk to them about ways to respond or ways to think about it. And I mean, I've got a college freshman in my household too, so it's something we're all thinking about.
What college did they go to?
My son is at Case Western Reserve in Cleveland.
Oh, wow. How is it over there in terms of...
so it's complicated. Yeah. Earlier this semester, there's some anti-Semitic and pro-Palestinian graffiti was painted on a bunch of the a bunch of the buildings.
Oh,
The school actually identified 4 people who did it and arrested them.
okay. That's progress.
And the students spent a couple of nights in the Cleveland jail
Oh,
before they
wow.
were before they
Okay.
raised bond and were released, and there were protest marches about why they were arrested. But I mean, the school spent over $50,000 doing the cleanup of the damage that was done. And I'll also give the Hillel credit.
Yeah.
The Monday night before Giving Tuesday, they were smart enough to organize a Zoom session for parents who were concerned about safety and security for the Jewish community on campus, and they had 2 top university administrators come on to talk to us parents, and it was a really productive, helpful hour-plus conversation. What better way to set up than making an appeal for Giving Tuesday for Hillel than directly appealing to our and there were probably 20, 25 parents on hearing really thoughtful, and also hearing a college that really recognizes they want to provide a safe and secure place for our kids.
That's good. That's a lot more than we hear about other places.
Yeah, I mean, I will give. I think the schools here have been pretty responsive, pretty reaching out. I mean, I'm super impressed. I mean, College Park has, while there've been tensions because there's a student SJP campus.
Yeah.
But like the Hillel there has a great reputation. All 5 in the state have been, and I spent a lot of time talking to Towson University's new president, who's very conscious of this and very thoughtful. So hopefully our kids on our Maryland campuses are feeling secure despite the high-profile headline-grabbing incidents.
Yeah, and shout out to Hillel for doing such a great job in making all the Jewish students feel welcome and they belong.
Yeah, and I know I tell this to parents who are actually not as much parents as much as grandparents and others who think our kids are like under siege every day on the campuses. I do try and remind them that there's still a lot of Jewish joy going on, that there are protected areas. Yes, you only want to focus on the months-long encampment at Hopkins and thinking every Jewish student at Hopkins must feel under threat. And there are moments.
Yes.
But most of the time, they're going there, they're able to celebrate Shabbat, they're able to celebrate Passover, they're able to just hang out with other Jewish students and talk about things and hear speakers and be part of an active Jewish life. And the Hillels and the Chabads and others are making that happen.
Yes, and that's very important. Even though I know I see in other places, not specifically in Maryland, but other campuses around the country, that it's been pretty rough, especially in New York. I've seen a lot of that in New York.
Yeah, very much so.
Yeah. So I've heard today that the Associated is coming up with an anti-Semitism task force.
So the Associated, I'll give you a little. I'll step back, give you a little history. Back in 2019, when we were seeing things surge, Charlottesville, et cetera.
Yeah.
We set up. We did kind of a community leadership summit about anti-Semitism. We invited the top professional and the top lay leader from every institution in town. So it was like the rabbi and the board president, or the principal of the Jewish day school and the board president, that kind of thing. We had, I think, 75 people there. We intentionally seated people in mixed tables. The chair of a Reform synagogue sitting at a table with an Orthodox rabbi, and had them talk about what more we needed to be doing. And from there, we had a task force, came up with an action plan that was released in 2020 during COVID. And it's driven some of what we've done. This past spring, as we thought about how anti-Semitism had surged since October 7th and thought about how we'd been responding, understandably, much of our response last year was reactive.
Yeah.
It was in response to this happening or that happening. So there was a thought, how can we both increase our capacity to respond more, because our staff is stretched pretty thin, and also how can we turn the corner, be more proactive, not just be reactive. So over the summer, a group of mostly lay leaders, a couple others, Rabbi Grunberg from Hizikamuno served on it, it was a mixed group that got together. I think the goal was not to create a multi-year task force. It was for them to meet 4 times over the summer and come up with a plan, which then was done right around the high holidays, and it's been approved, and it's going to be rolling out soon, and it's going to involve creating a Center for Combating Anti-Semitism within the Associated. Title to come, but right, that's the working title. Hiring a person for that position,
Okay.
plus potentially adding another half person at the Baltimore Jewish Council. And we would obviously work closely with them. We are still, I have a staff member who's the director of Holocaust and Countering Anti-Semitism
Hmm.
programs, plus me, and we are, you know, up to our eyeballs every day and needing to respond to stuff. So it'll be great to have another person there working on training. How can we train lay leaders to be more actively engaged or to teach? How can we help prepare our high school students better for what they're going to encounter? And I'm hopeful that if we're able to invest in more staff and more time and think more proactively, we will be even more effective.
Yeah, it sounds like a great plan. I think obviously we need that right now.
Unfortunately,
Yes.
yeah.
I wish we didn't.
I'll tell you, when I've been in this job 8.5 years,
Mhm.
and just before I'd started, the lay leaders had gotten together and thought about so it's probably about 10 years ago, thought about the priorities of what they thought the Baltimore Jewish Council needed to be focused on, and they obviously identified Israel and interfaith relations and Holocaust. What wasn't on the list of their top priorities was anti-Semitism.
Right.
So they didn't really designate a staff person to focus on that. Yes, we didn't think we'd solved it, but it was occasional. It was small. It was not a huge and
Yeah, it was
the
more
world is
mostly
turned
in the
upside
background.
down.
It wasn't
Yeah.
right there in everybody's
Right,
faces.
there'd be there was graffiti on a stop sign, a swastika painted on a stop sign in Pikesville. Let's get that painted over.
Yeah.
That kind of thing. Or there was someone said something inappropriate at a school, but it was not the drumbeat that we're seeing today.
Yeah. So, working in the Jewish Council, and I'm sure you've worked with other religions as well, with other organizations.
Sure.
Has there been a change in that since October 7th? Have you? I mean, I'm sure that there has.
We've invested many years in building deep partnerships with
Mhm.
a lot of the faith communities, and when the vigils happened after October 7th, I heard from many faith partners. They showed up at our
Mhm.
vigils. They showed up at our events. There were expressions of solidarity, and for the most part, those bonds have held pretty well. I mean, I understand in some faiths that there's been increasing pressure calling for the release of the hostages and a ceasefire, which makes sense. A lot of people in our community feel that way. As long as the two have
The
to be paired.
hostages has to
The
be.
hostages
Yeah.
has to be part of
Yeah.
the conversation. Unfortunately, with many of our Muslim partners, the relationships have been more broken, and it's been hard to. There are some
Mhm.
with whom I'm still in touch. Much less so among the Muslim partners who come from Middle Eastern backgrounds.
Yeah.
It's kind of been broken. In some cases, they have done or said things that are really inappropriate, or in others, they just don't want to talk to us. And we've, in the past, yes, we had disagreements over Israel,
Hmm.
and we could, have one of those where we're going to work together on lots of other things and maybe not have a conversation about Israel, but they won't. We can't see past that right now, and it's
Yeah.
been that way for the last 14, 15 months. I don't know how we get past it. I'm incredibly frustrated. I mean, I remember when there was the mosque attack in New Zealand a
Hmm.
few years ago, and we showed up at the vigils.
Right.
We were there in sympathy for and standing up against that hate, and it's we never saw that after October 7th, unfortunately.
Yeah, that's the story for us Jews. We show up for other minorities when they have their struggles and protests and everything, but it's rare that people show up for us.
Although I will, in many cases, the Catholic Church has been supportive, the Episcopal Church has been supportive. A lot of my friends who are Black, in the Black ministerial community,
Mhm.
have reached out and been supportive, and so there is that support. It's just we've really struggled. The Muslim relationship has become much more difficult. I
Yeah.
would say.
And it looks like the support is also behind closed doors most of the times. It's not out there in the open. As far as I can tell, from seeing things on social media, not a lot of people are very vocal about their support.
It's been harder, and it's
Yeah.
been harder. Like it or not, the current Israeli government is sometimes our own worst enemy in terms of building that support among other people. I mean, I think people appreciate and are very sympathetic for the losses suffered, for the hostages still being held. But I think when we start when we start to see some parts of the Israeli government talking about this being an opportunity to resettle all of the West Bank or resettle Gaza, that sometimes gets in the way of people talking about supporting a two-state solution, respecting Palestinian rights and Israeli rights. It's made it difficult at times, the political developments.
Yeah, I mean, I think, not to get too much into politics, I think like the Israeli government right now, there are a few players in there that are very extreme that
that carry a lot of influence.
They're not,
though.
yes.
Yeah. Like on our government, right?
I mean, but that's how it is,
yeah,
right?
The extreme elements are the ones who, when they talk, they get these huge headlines. None of us would say that the squad here in in the Democratic Party drives the entire Democratic Party agenda. In fact, most of it is mainstream, like Steny Hoyer, and
But
Ben
we would
Cardin.
hope they don't do that. But
We would hope they don't. And the same things with the Israeli government, right? Do the couple of really extreme ministers drive everything the government's doing? We'd hope they're not. We'd hope at the end of the day we're able to find reasonable, peaceful solutions.
Yes, and I hope at some point there will be. I mean, it's really difficult right now. And I had Dr. Anat Wilf on the podcast a couple months ago.
When she came in to speak, yeah, I came to her
and
presentation.
Yeah, and she was great. And she said, and I asked her if she thinks that peace is even possible at all. She said the moment that, and that's something that I've been saying also, the moment that the Palestinians and the Arab world accept Israel's existence as it is, as a Jewish state, and want to live peacefully side by side, that's the only way peace will come. And, it's true, because right now everybody is very radicalized. Everyone is, very much on the hate train towards Israel. And it's hard to see, but it's been like this for decades. It's nothing new.
It is, but we have, the Abraham Accords has offered some hope.
Right, that's a little bit of
and we've had peaceful existence with Egypt and with Jordan. I mean, we've reached some settlements, not necessarily warm embraces, but
I mean, it's just okay. We would tolerate you being here,
and there. I don't even want to go through the history of all the different peace negotiations, but the Palestinian Authority has acknowledged Israel, but
no, but they refused. They refused peace.
They haven't. They've gotten certainly closer than Hamas did, but yes, they've refused. We've not been able to negotiate.
No,
negotiate.
They've received offers, but they never agreed.
They never got close enough, and part of that is, I think, the more radical elements of the Palestinian populations made it clear that if the more moderate PA leadership accepted it, they would be attacked.
Right, but even so, like the PA, they're not very moderate. They're compared to Hamas, maybe,
right?
But they
it's
still
all perspective.
They have a pay to slay. They have all these things.
Question.
They're still,
Yeah. No, it's not. I don't want to say they're the perfect partner.
No,
but they're the closest we've got to some of the Palestinian to maybe someday. I mean, it's amazing when you think about some of the peace offers that were on the table in the last 30 years that they walked away from, and now where we are today. It's incredibly disheartening.
Yeah. Well, I don't know if we'll come to a final, like if it's just
in our lifetimes,
a solution for that, but probably not. But who knows? We can only hope for something. Because I mean, it needs to come to an end. We can't continue living like this. That every couple of years there's something.
I think about the people who live on the northern border, the people who live in our partners in our sister city Ashkelon and along those southern border kibbutzes, and what they've lived with the last for decades.
Right.
And then,
I mean, I'm from Israel originally. My whole family is in Israel. My mom and my grandma, they live in Ashdod, which has also received a lot of rockets. My family in Rehovot also, like everybody at this point have received so many rockets, especially this past year. And it's, it's just not, nobody needs to live like this.
It's scary to think that when you raise a family, you've got to, among the earliest lessons your kids need to learn is, where's the safe room?
Yeah.
Whether you're at home or whether you're at a friend's house or whether you're at school. And you've got to make sure you've got a quick route to get there, particularly the closer you live to the border.
Right.
It's,
by now it's like everywhere, basically. It's not just.
Yeah. And or if you're going there to stay in a hotel, where do I go so I mean, before the war, if you go and stay in Tel Aviv or Jerusalem, you didn't have to think about that. Really.
Right.
But now you do. And we would send Elijah Cummings Youth Program students, when they
Mhm.
spend their month in Israel, each summer, they spend a Shabbat weekend with host families in Ashkelon. And
Right.
yes, when they get there, that is the first lesson they learn from the family
Yeah.
that they're staying with for Shabbat. Is that, and actually one year, um, I don't remember, it was 2018, 2019, the sirens went off
Mhm.
because there were some some things launched from Gaza, and we had to make the decision to send the kids back to Yemen Ord in the middle of Shabbat, just because we couldn't risk, even though we knew,
I mean, yeah, that
it's
just
safe. The safe
right.
rooms are safe, and the kids didn't want to go because they're like, well, if the families are comfortable, why can't I stay? But
Right.
we're like, we have a different obligation to your
Yeah.
families here in Baltimore. We need to move you. I'm sorry.
Yeah, it's interesting seeing it from a different perspective because growing up in Israel, I mean, I was, I think, 7 or 8 when the Gulf War started, and we had to go to carry the gas mask with us to school. We had like
Right.
every
In
single
91,
day.
yeah, 91,
Yeah.
90, 91. Yeah,
Yeah, my
that's
brother was a
crazy.
baby. Yeah, he was in
Yeah.
this little crib thing, and we didn't have safe rooms at the time. We had shelters, like community shelters. We didn't have safe rooms, so we had to put like wet towels under the doors and like mask and tape, like the whole thing, tape the doors so we could go in there. And we had this guy on TV that every time something happened, he said "Nachash Tzefa," which is like the alarm, like siren back then, and we would all go into the rooms. Those room. Yeah, it was crazy. And we used to go, I mean, we got to a point where we got so used to it that we decorated our box, like the mask box that we took to school. We had, because this was our life for a while, and that just been our life since forever. I mean, I know there was a war when I was a baby, there was a war when I was that age, and then when I was in the military, there was a second Gulf War. So we've been through a lot, and we had obviously the intifadas and all these things that was like a whole different kind of scary.
Yeah, right. When you're worried about getting on a bus, or
Yeah,
worried
you
about
don't know
being
if you're going to be on
in
a bus and you're going to
restaurant
explode. Yeah.
and always looking over your shoulder. It's a very it's got to be a really complicated way to grow
It is.
up.
It's scary. And now seeing my niece and nephew, like they're 3 and 5, and they had to go to the safe room in the middle of the night. Like it's a bad feeling. But then we're used to it. Sadly, that's just the life, Israeli
isn't that
life.
really hard? That
Yeah.
it's no one should have to grow up like this.
No.
Whether you're in Israel or in Odessa or
Yeah, it doesn't
anywhere
matter
around the
where.
world,
Nobody
it
should grow up
shouldn't
like
be.
this.
But fortunately, Israelis have learned to accommodate, to be
Yeah, we're
strong.
resilient. We don't have a
Yes.
choice.
I mean, I think about, and I talk to people about this as I think about like my personal knowledge of Israel, and
Mhm.
I grew up. So my first like real understanding political of Israel was like when I was probably about 10,
Mhm.
and that would have been the 82 Lebanon invasion.
Oh wow.
So, like, for as long as I've been thinking about Israel, I've always thought of Israel as being this military might and this really strong country, right?
Yeah.
Because going back to then, like yes, all of the neighbors with hundreds of thousands of troops are lined up against, but Israel's got the technology and the military and the discipline to
Mhm.
defend itself. And until October 7th, I was never really that worried Israel was going to
No one
would
was.
survive.
Yeah.
But like, I think about like the generation before us,
Mhm.
who grew up, and were thinking about Israel in the 50s and 60s and early 70s, they would wake up some mornings to check the New York Times to see, did Israel survive?
Yeah.
The latest, like Israel really was on much dicier ground for all those years. And so
Yeah.
I like to think that explains some of the difference of perspective among the 50-year-old and younger generation versus the older generation that grew up with an Israel that was much at times didn't have the military might, and was very much the weakling, and
Yeah.
was the David and Goliath fight. And now these college kids see Israel as the Goliath,
Which is insane.
which is crazy.
It's really crazy.
Yes. Yeah, but that's kind of how they've come to justify
Yeah.
where they are.
Yeah, I think like the education nowadays and the terms the kids learn and come up with, like the oppressed versus the oppressor and all these things. It just
Yeah, when you hear people say the Jews in Israel are just are colonial settlers and have no right to be there. And when I've talked to other groups,
Yeah.
for example, I did a session after with the leading Latino organization in Maryland after they said some things that crossed the line.
Yeah.
And they gave me a little bit over an hour to kind of talk to them about anti-Semitism, history of Israel. And I this is the Latino organization, obviously deep Catholic roots, deep roots in the Bible. I said, think back to the Bible. Like, the Jews were there first, and then came the Christians, and then came the Muslims.
Right.
So if you just think back to believing in the Bible, the Jews, I'm not saying we have a claim to all the land or anything like that, but we certainly have a stake in some of it and a legitimate right to be there as part of it. And that, like, that made sense to them. Like, they hadn't put the two parts together.
Right, because they saw what people are talking about, and this is it.
And they also don't understand that when you actually go to Israel and they talk about, like, white colonial settlers. Well, actually, if you walk around Israel, half the people there you would consider to be people of color.
More than half. It's 60% of people are Mizrahi and Sephardic and all. My family's from Morocco.
Yeah.
Like, you would never look at my dad and say, this is a white man.
Right. You want to talk about the ethnic cleansing that happened after the forming of Israel, the ethnic cleansing that happened of Jews from all the Muslim countries around them that all got, displaced and sent, and basically your choice was to go to Israel.
Yeah, this is it. To go back to Israel because, my dad's family, part of his family has been in Israel for thousands of years in the north. And he specifically, he was born in Morocco, and then they moved to Israel when he was 2. But just seeing, like, it's like you're going back home because we were exiled from Israel so many times. Right. And then we were kicked out of Arab countries and Europe and everything else. So we had no choice but to go back.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So whenever everybody says, like, go back to Poland, I was like, what?
No.
No,
we got kicked out of Israel, and that's why we went to Europe and back in the many hundreds and hundreds of years ago.
Yeah. So when was the last time you were in Israel?
So I have not been since before the pandemic, unfortunately.
Oh, wow. So it's been a while.
It's been a while, just due to the pandemic, obviously, and then just since due to family issues with my health of parents and things, it made it difficult to plan a trip.
Do you have any plans to go in the near future?
I don't know. I would like to. I mean, we keep talking about an economic trade mission for Maryland, and I certainly would try and go as part of that. But I don't have a specific plan right now. It's also the challenge of, my son went after the pandemic as part of his summer camp, Jewish summer camp, which was great. My daughter's camp age to go to Israel was supposed to be this past summer.
But obviously
didn't happen. Yeah. She instead did wonderful trips through Central Europe and got to, saw, did the trip to Germany and Poland and all of that, which was a meaningful Jewish experience.
Oh, they went to the concentration camps?
Yeah, to the concentration camps and the other Jewish parts of Europe. Would love for her to go, would love to plan that trip. Got to figure it out. I know we've done some solidarity trips here. I intend to join one at some point. I don't have anything on the immediate radar. Again, I've parents' health kept me here for a while to not be able to travel for a bit.
Okay, that makes sense.
When was the last time you were there?
I was there in the summer.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, my whole family is there. So I try to go every other year. I wish I could go every year. That would be great. And I was there in the summer. I was there for 2.5 weeks. I wish I could stay longer. But then my daughter had to go to camp, so we had to come back.
Family, yes, of course.
But it was, for me as an Israeli, the whole thing that happened on October 7th for me, like, completely threw me out. Like, it was devastating.
It gives you changes your whole perspective on government and protection and where we are. Yeah, it
was very shocking. I particularly, I spoke to my sister the night before, and she said, "Oh, we have sirens again. We have rockets," and both of us thought, like, it's just another day of rockets, and then
random firings.
Yeah, it will stop in a couple of days, and everything will be fine. And then I woke up in the morning on Saturday morning, and I had so many messages on my phone from my family. I'm like, "What's going on? Like, what is this?" And they sent me all these things, and then I go on social media, I see all these videos. I'm like, and I think one of the very first ones I saw actually was a video of Shiri Bibas and the little babies being kidnapped. And I was so confused. It was really shocking. I didn't know what's going on. And then from that point for 2 days, I was on my phone constantly talking to the family and watching these videos and reading these stories. Like I'm like, I didn't know what to do. And then I came back to work on Monday, and we were just like Israel mode the whole time, talking about this, sending emails, doing stuff. So like the first 2 weeks, I don't even know where my brain was because it was just all about this. But then I couldn't couldn't cope with anything because I was busy with doing stuff.
It was
Um,
a very hard. I mean, time, and it hasn't. I mean, yes, the urgent intensity is let up,
mhm.
but not the feelings.
No,
Not the feelings. I mean, we just had a program last night where we um, that that Bethel helped co-sponsor of the Maryland premiere of the Torn documentary about the
yes,
hostages
hmm
and the hostage posters and the fight in New York, and it brought back so many emotions of the back and forth that we've been experiencing.
yeah, that was the whole thing. Yeah, so like going back to Israel after everything, and it just the feeling was, you could see people were like kind of on about their business, their usual daily routine, but then they were not also at the same time because you see all the posters everywhere and the pictures of the hostages everywhere and their families. And then I went to the hostage square and I went to where the Nova Festival happened. And you see all these names and faces and hear their stories. And it's heartbreaking. And it's just so hard to to come to terms with. Like, it's really hard to comprehend, like, still, even though like I understand what happened, but it's hard to
And I struggle with the folks who who deny some of what happened. I mean,
uh,
I have great
yeah.
appreciation for like the documentary that Sheryl Sandberg put together
Mm-hmm.
about the sexual violence and all
Yeah,
was
that was a great documentary.
and some of the other like it's it's horrifying the details. You know, we did a couple of small screenings
Mm-hmm.
of the GoPro video
Oh, really?
that the embassy that the Israeli government put
Oh,
together.
wow. That's a
And
tough
that
one.
was very so we brought together. We mostly invited non-Jewish leaders in town,
Yeah.
non-Jewish
Yes,
nonprofit
that's
business
that's
leaders,
important. Yeah.
and it was like small groups of like 15. I watched it twice with the group.
Oh,
We did it
wow.
back
How
to
did
back.
people react to that?
It was total silence as people walked out. Like they were stunned
Were there
by
people that
seeing.
left in the middle of it?
I don't think anybody walked out. I think we'd
Hmm.
warned them,
Yeah.
and we actually had a counselor from Jewish Community Services on hand.
Okay.
One or two people took advantage, just talking a little bit afterward. But there was not. There was a little bit of follow up commentary after because the IDF always sends a soldier to
Yeah.
go with the showing, and so the woman who, the female soldier who was with it, shared some of her personal thoughts, including the first time, and this was awful. The first time she saw the film,
Mm-hmm.
she saw someone she knew who she had not heard from since, and saw the
Oh
person's
my
like
God.
she learned the fate of that friend when she
Yeah.
saw that friend, it having been her body.
Yeah. A lot of the families learned about their loved ones being murdered and tortured
From
from
the
these
video.
videos.
Yes, and many of them were, I have deep appreciation for them allowing the video to be used
I mean, it's
to
hard. Yeah.
to shock people. I mean, not to
Right.
shock, but to
People need to know what
people need
happened.
to know what happened,
Yes.
and you want these leaders in town to understand why we were so deeply affected, and in this culture with social media and video and lack of trust for the mainstream media,
Yeah.
seeing the videos, seeing the Hamas fighters laughing and cheering, and seeing them hunting down little kids in safe rooms.
Yeah.
Um, it was
Babies.
babies. It
Yeah.
was, I very much appreciate that I had the opportunity to see it, and I very much wish I could unwatch it.
Yes. I think that video is extremely important to watch, particularly for those from not the Jewish world, not the Israeli world, the people from
Yeah, the
outside.
college presidents, the head,
The college
those,
students,
the
I think.
well, yes,
They should, yeah.
yeah,
One of my
yeah.
thoughts was like we should I mean, it's horrible, but we should probably broadcast it on a big wall, one of the universities, so they can see it in front of their faces in the biggest screen they could find. Because
Yeah, I My fear is how some of those college students would find a way to disrespect it
I know.
and disrespect the people. And it is, having watched that, the torn documentary last night, and to see how people in New York just so callous, so many of them just so callously tore down, posters
Yeah.
of little children who are being held hostage, and the foul language they used to describe it. It was heartbreaking. Like, and some of them would say, "Well, where are the Palestinian posters? Well, make them. Make those too." Like the message
Yeah,
was,
nobody
like,
would tear them down.
No, right. Put up both. Put up. None. All of our hearts are breaking over the innocent Palestinian children and others who are being killed in this too. All as a result of Hamas. All as a result of how Hamas has set up its tunnels and its weapons underneath schools and in residential neighborhoods. And none of us want to see that violence. And it could all end if they would just release the hostages.
Yeah. If Hamas was held accountable from the beginning and made to release the hostages, none of this would have happened.
Totally. Totally.
Okay, so going from this heavy thing to
Yes.
to a little segment that I have, a new one. It's called my favorite Israeli thing. So I'm going to ask you like little things and just
Okay,
say
I'll do my
what comes
best.
to mind. Your favorite Hebrew expression or word?
That's a good question. Simcha.
That's a good one.
I like the periods of Jewish joy. I like going to, whether it's a wedding or a bar mitzvah or a bris.
Yeah,
I like those joyous moments of Jewish life.
that's good. Your favorite known Israeli figure, past or present, it could be dead or alive.
I am a particular fan of Golda Meir.
Oh,
And from that, and the reason, as much as anything, is it speaks to me about an amazingly talented woman leading a country in that time. Like, it speaks to me about how open-minded Israel is about talent and everything. How few countries at that time had a female leader, and I look at it as inspiring for my daughter,
yeah.
for her future.
Yeah, the Golda Meir was incredible. And we don't have leaders like that nowadays, unfortunately. I think she was very strong.
She was very strong,
Yes.
and I always, as you know, President Biden routinely tells the stories about having met her when he was a young senator, and it's so inspiring that she, that relationship built then helped ensure that President Biden and the American people stood with Israel after October 7th. Like, that investment of time and relationship paid off 50 years later.
Yeah, I mean, they had some hiccups, unfortunately, but
there were some hiccups. But look, Joe Biden went and traveled to Israel.
Yeah, he did
after it, and has continued. Yes, there have been challenges, but for the most part, he has been a great ally.
Yeah, I think with Golda also, like her story from the beginning, from childhood, through her life, that's a very inspiring story.
Yes.
What is your favorite place to visit in Israel?
Is it trite to say the Western Wall?
Yeah.
The first time I went to Israel, going there that went out from the hotel that night. I was staying at the King David, and going out that night to visit the wall, and having never been, it was just such an emotional visit. And every time I go back and I get the chance, and I'll try and go 2 or 3 times on a visit if I'm going to be staying in Jerusalem multiple days. And that just means so much.
Yeah, I gotta say I haven't been there in years.
It's funny when I've traveled to Israel at different times, and I've been with like some Israelis who are part of our group or leading something or whatever. Like, they don't necessarily get the fascination that all of us have with wanting to go to the wall. Like, for them, it's like, yeah, whatever. And I mean, I guess it's they may go once in their life. It's not like,
yeah. I mean, I was there a few times in my life, but I haven't been there in years.
It's not like, it's like every visit, like, check the box, you have to go visit. I feel like I have to go visit it.
Yeah.
And they're like, well, what's the big fascination? I'm like, it just is. It just feels, yeah.
I guess it's different when you come from a different country and you don't you don't get a chance to see it as often as we could, obviously. I mean,
Sure,
living
right.
there.
Like when you come,
Yeah.
if you come to visit, if you come to visit New York City from overseas, I got to go see Times Square.
Yeah, right.
And I'm like,
Yeah, New Yorkers never go
no,
there.
no, yeah. Like, why would you go to Times Square? Or if you're in D.C., like, oh, I got to go see the Washington Monument.
Yeah.
Okay, I guess, sure.
Right. Well, yeah, it makes sense. Okay. What is your favorite Israeli food?
Shawarma.
Oh, that's the best.
Yes, it was. I'd had shawarma here, but it doesn't
No.
compare. And
Mm-mm.
when my son spent I guess it was a month or so in Israel after as part of his camp experience, I told him, like, you're gonna love the shawarma. It's gonna be so much better. And he was absolutely right. And he said actually the best he had was one day they were in a mixed Arab town,
Mhm.
and they had time to go find their own lunch. They wandered into a restaurant where it was Arab owned, Arab run, and there was one guy in the back who spoke English. He said the best shawarma we ever had there, which is a pretty typical story,
Yeah.
I think.
Well, the best shawarma I ever had was in this little place where I grew up in Rehovot. It's called Kareti. And we used to go there when I was a kid. We used to go there like a couple times a week. That's hands down best shawarma ever. And till this day, like when I go there, I need to have that. Yeah.
kind of like when I go back to where I grew up in the Chicago area, and the neighborhood pizza joint is the best
Yeah.
pizza I've ever had. I have to go there when I would go home and visit my
Yeah,
parents.
exactly. And lastly, what is your favorite memory from Israel?
So I don't know if it's favorite. Most distinctive memory
Mm-hmm.
was on one trip I went as part of a group where we got to see parts of Israel I don't typically explore, and we spent much of a day in Bnei Barak.
Oh.
And it gave me such deeper insight into
Mhm.
understanding some of the challenges Israel's facing between the ultra-Orthodox
Yeah.
and the rest of the population, and hearing things from the perspective of the residents there,
Mm-hmm.
and seeing the challenges, and learning about also the poverty of the ultra-Orthodox community, because many of them haven't gotten involved in the high tech world and all the
Yeah, a lot of them
jobs
don't work.
and so it just gave me a much better insight, and that I think back often as we think about the current conflicts with military drafts and all that stuff. I'm not sure favorites necessarily the word, but it's just most
memorable, I guess.
most impactful.
Yeah.
Yeah, most memorable. Obviously, love time in Tel Aviv. Love time going through the Shuk.
Yeah, the Shuk is the best.
The Shuk's the best in Jerusalem, and getting, thinking back to times where in retrospect, I was probably ripped off.
Yeah. If you don't speak Hebrew, if you go there as a tourist, that's it. Forget it.
Somehow I'm sure I spent way too much money buying a couple of little pieces of jewelry for my.
But I guess
daughter.
it's the experience.
It's experience, right? It's you're paying for the experience, not for the little piece of jewelry.
Yeah. All right. So, Howard, what would you like to wish to Israelis and Jewish people, Jewish communities around the world for this new coming year?
Peace. It's just about peace. It's about finding a way to get the hostages home. It's about finding a way to end the hostility, both within Israel proper and against Jews around the world. Like, if we can find a way to peacefully coexist, to respect each other, that would be my wish for 2025. And I guess I would say, hopefully the hostages are home before 2025 even starts.
Amen. Yes, hopefully. We still have 100 hostages held captive, including 2 little babies, the Bibas babies.
It's horrifying.
Yeah. So, yes. Well, thank you. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me.
It was a pleasure having you.
It was a great conversation. Yes.
Yes. And thank you all for listening. Until next time.